Welcome to another episode of Two Truths and a Life, and thank you for joining us. This is the fourth episode and our first guest episode with the amazing, the wonderful, my good friend, Lockie Welch. Brother, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Bro, it's always nice to sit in the space with you and have a deep conversation. I know off air, you and I always get into super deep conversations just about anything and everything, so it's nice that we can actually, capture it and, put it out into the world. And I'm just honoured and pleasure to sit across from you. I know you come onto my podcast, and brother, I just want to return the love, and man, I want to see what this space is going to open up things for you.
Amazing, bro, amazing. And we're actually in the same studio where we were when we did the podcast for the Awake podcast, right? Wake and Aware podcast.
The Awake and Aware, yeah, man. Unreal.
Man, and what a journey it's been for you since then, dude. Since we were sitting in this same studio, man, just like watching the way that your social media presence has grown, watching all the opportunities that you've got now to really serve the mental health space and all that side of things, bro. It's just been wild to actually watch and to see you growing in that space, man. So I guess let's really get to the nitty-gritty of who Lockie Welch is, and I'd love just to hear a bit about you. I guess what life was like for you growing up, and what sort of led you to wanting to work within the mental health space.
Yeah, man. I mean, firstly, thanks for that, bro. It's been quite a wild journey, if you will, since our episode, and the way things kicked off online and sort of thing. It's just all sort of come together, and I can't be more grateful. The love that I continuously, am out to receive is something that I'm so grateful for. But I guess, to get to the nitty and gritty, man. The journey of Lockie Welch, it's been a journey to say the least. I think.
Hasn't it just?
It has, man. And, I guess going back to, if we want to get down to the depth of it, my childhood, it was a good childhood, I think. But for the most part, I grew up with having a split family. Mum and dad split before I was even born. So I never really grew up like the other normal kids who I went to school with. I never grew up with, knowing what a full circle family was. I never really knew what that life was. So I think from the get-go, I always thought I was a little bit different.
Right.
And I always thought I was a bit of an outcast.
Yeah.
And that just came back from the embodiment of, not knowing what these other kids were experiencing, because it was out of the normal to, have a split family at such a young age.
And especially at that time as well. I feel like right now in the world that we live in, blended families, split families, like all that sort of stuff, it's almost like the normal dynamic. However, like obviously when we were a lot younger, that was like an unheard of thing, right?
It was, man. And, I grew up seeing families at school, but I only had a single parent, and I think from the get-go, I always found myself trying to fit in through, receiving validation, whether it be me acting out in class or, me, bullying that kid to get attention, or me receiving the bullying as well.
Of course.
So there was always that push and pull growing up, even from the get-go. And, I think when things started, I was never, from the get-go, I was never an academically talented kid. I always struggled in school.
Can relate, man. Can relate.
Even until my last day of grade 12, I struggled. And that was something that I had to navigate pretty deeply for the longest time that I can remember. Things started to go really south in terms of my schooling years. I was about 9 years old, and Mum got diagnosed with cancer.
Okay.
So that day that happened, I sort of knew something was up. Something felt weird in the household. And I remember one time she come down to the kitchen and she said, "Lockie, I have to show you something." I said, "Yeah, okay." And she always had this rag on her head. I didn't really know what it was for. And then she took it off and she had no hair. And I was like, "Why? What's that? Why are you bald?" She goes, "Lockie, I have cancer."
Wow.
And
how old were you when you found that out?
9. I was 9 years old, man. And, I think being a 9-year-old kid, I didn't have the self-awareness to know what cancer really was. I think, whenever we hear cancer, we think of death. That's the immediate thought, what's related to that. And the first thing I said to Mum was, "So, Mum, you're dying." And I think Mum, she just sort of broke down in tears from that. And that damaged me quite deeply. I lived my life in fear that I was not going to have a mum the next day that I woke up.
Yeah.
I thought that I was going to, get called up from school saying that, mum's passed away from cancer.
And this was like a belief that you had that was almost like playing out in your head constantly.
It was, man. And that caused me to act up more so than I ever have been.
Yeah.
I was always continuously in and out of the office, in and out of the principal's office, suspended, expelled. The way that I was treating other people in school just went from 0 to 100 real quick. And it was just a projection of the way I was feeling.
Of course.
I didn't have any self-awareness back then, of course, no. But,
Of course.
that led me to a lot of, downfalls within my own academics too. And that led me to, I was been to so many different schools. And growing up, Dad he was around, but not around enough as what I wanted him to.
Of course, and not really able to be there to be a positive male role model for you.
No, for sure not.
Yeah.
And, I think apart from, mum growing up with cancer, I always thought love was transactional with Dad. I always thought that I had to perform or I had to succeed in order to receive love. I think for a long time, the way that he showed his love was through monetary items.
Yeah, and so it was only when you'd actually, I guess, perform or do certain things that he would then give you that love through material things.
Exactly
Gotcha.
right. And it became this belief that it was always conditional, which I now know through healing with him and the conversation I've had with him is just he didn't know what to do.
Of course.
He wasn't shown the love that he needed when he was a kid. So how can he do the same? Like you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. It's really interesting, right? Because when we were really young, we sort of look at our parents and it's like if we didn't get our needs met, it's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
But like it allows you as you grow and I guess as you become more aware to see that, they're probably just doing the best with what they have and it almost allows you to feel somewhat compassion and empathy towards them.
Absolutely, man. And I think now Dad and I have a great relationship, but growing up my whole childhood years, there was always a lot of resentment. Dad and I always used to fight. From from when I was like 9, 8 years old, we would be screaming at each other, you know what I mean, in the house. And that isn't a loving relationship or, something that's going to serve me long term. And after, Mum got diagnosed, I would come home from school and tell Mum I wanted to kill myself.
Wow.
Almost daily. And so that led me
From the age of 9?
From the age of 9, I'd come home from school like, Mum, I want to kill myself. And that led me to, Mum saw that and she knew like that's not right.
Yeah.
So she put me in touch with psychologists and I saw psychologists for years, growing up through primary school and into early years of high school, which, probably would have helped a little bit at the time. So I guess I've always known to talk about my problems and talk about my emotions because I've been seeing a psychologist since I was, a wee one. But, and then that led me to growing up, always felt like I needed to, serve a part of me to be able to receive, the relationship I had with Dad, that translated into my relationship with everyone else in the classroom, in the schoolyard, throughout my academics. I always thought that I had to be someone who I wasn't in order to fit in.
Gotcha.
So that led me to leading down the wrong path and, probably getting involved with some not the most healthiest amount of people, just so I could fit in and feel validated and to sort of fill that void that I never felt with my dad growing up. And so that led me on for many years. And I guess in terms of the mental health space, when I was first come into contact with the stigma, I was 15 years old, 25th of May 2017. I saw one of my best mates one day. I said, "Oh, brother, I'll see you tomorrow. Can't wait to see you, bro." Gave each other a hug. And the next day, I got news that he was found hanging in the garage of his house by his stepbrother. And I think being 15 years of age, and having someone really close to you take their own life, it's like, why did that even happen? He was the most happiest, the most jolly, the most joyful, the most positive, the most charismatic individual you would ever come across. He loved his sports. He would always have a baseball in his hand. He would always have some form of, sports surrounding him, always surrounded by people. His family was incredibly loving. Why did he feel the need that his days weren't worth living? Yeah, bro. And so that led me to a huge journey into, developing knowledge around mental health, at such a young age. Like I still can't even to this day fathom why Stuart didn't really feel that he fit into this life, that he cut his days short. And so that led me to a journey, but that also, to deal with the grief, I were led with the wrong people, and I started smoking, and then I started getting on the bongs, and I started doing MD, and then I started doing coke, and then I started doing everything else you can think of from the age of 15, just to feel that person who I didn't even know I was. You know, I was trying to deal with the grief of one of my really close friends, you know, taking his life. For that, I couldn't even comprehend that at such a young age. And so to combat that further, to combat the transactional love I feel like I needed with Dad, it led me to I started doing drugs, at 15.
Yep.
Always in and out of schools. I've can probably count more schools on one hand than on two hands than I can on one. And my schooling years was never linear, for sure. I was not the greatest of kids. I was always acting out. I was the most angry little boy you could ever think of.
Gotcha.
I would always, just have these outbursts of rage, or come home and abuse my sisters, or yell at my family. And I was a hurt, scared little boy.
That's what it comes down to, right? It's just literally a young man that doesn't know how to express himself, trying to find any way to do that, right? Being hurt like that at such a young age, we internalise that and don't know what to do with it, And it's not until we get a little bit older and actually become emotionally aware or emotionally intelligent we understand where those feelings come from and what they actually are, right?
Yeah, man, exactly. And through I guess the journey of healing and the self-development I've done, I've uncovered most of that of the inner child and what that sort of looked like for me. But yeah, man, I struggled a lot growing up with the transactional love I felt like from Dad, and feeling like my mum was going to die from cancer, which she's made a full recovery to this day, and I want to preface that, praise the Lord.
Love that, brother.
Yeah,
love
man.
that.
And
so glad to hear that, man.
Yeah, bro. There was some shaky years there for a long time. And,
for sure.
Like Mum, she's been through the wars, man. She's, both of her marriages have broken down as a result of cheating, and she's just the most, she's a beautiful angel, and she doesn't deserve what's been served to her. So, and I think that's seeing the way Mum was treated growing up, or seeing the way her marriages have fallen through, and seeing the emotional damage that she's, went through. It's showed me so much about even just how to treat a woman, and how not to treat a woman as well.
Of course, yeah, for sure.
I can never stand here or bring myself to treating someone the way that I know was going to make them have that emotional response.
After seeing what your mum went through, right?
I've seen it firsthand, man. I don't, but that's a separate conversation that you and I can have. But yeah, in terms of the growing up and sort of where Lockie Welch has landed from, there was a lot of adversity, a lot of struggle. I think on the outside looking in, our family was always really good. I was always involved in sports, always sports. I played baseball for more than half my life, and that's something that's deeply rooted into my family. A lot of my family members have been in Australian teams and professional teams, and I was sort of trying to leave that legacy and lead in that footsteps. And I probably could have, but at 15 I started doing drugs. So
and that's generally what takes place. It's like, I'm going to go this way, I'm going to go that way. The drugs look pretty good, and that's a nice looking booty.
Yeah.
Damn, girl.
Yeah,
man, know the feeling.
I probably could have made something of myself in terms of, going overseas and playing baseball in America, but I started doing goon and drinking goon at 15, and started smoking pot at 15 and a half. So
did you play goon of fortune is the question.
I do. Silly question.
Hang the goon sack. Is it Australian? It must be an Australian thing, right?
It is, yeah.
It is. Aussie as they come. Hang the goon sack off the Hills Hoist clothesline and spin it round, and then whenever it lands on, you got to drink it.
Yeah,
you got to skull that shit.
A lot of that, man. Yeah, there was goon spins too, and just
and just spin around. Man, that takes me back to being like 15 years old.
Dude, horrible. But and that was a coping mechanism, man.
Of course.
From such a young age, but it was masked with, it's a little bit of fun, but subconsciously it was a mask of...
That's what it was. It was a coping mechanism. It was a way to... It was actually not a problem. It was a solution.
Yeah.
It was a solution to a problem that you were having, which was not being able to regulate your emotions or understand what was going on for you at the time, right? So
Absolutely,
it's like, what do? We just avoid... But not only that, man, like, obviously, as a young man or woman even, like, a lot of the time this is what takes place. But then again, for us as men in a culture where, we're taught that big boys don't cry, don't be a little bitch, just internalise your emotions. And even, like, I guess... I'm not too sure what your relationship with your dad around that sort of stuff was like, but you wouldn't have probably seen him expressing his emotions And obviously after the conversation you've had with him since, you know, realising that he was just loving you with the best of his ability because 100%. Of what he had been through or what he had been taught whilst growing up. It's like, well, what else can you expect to happen, right? We're in a culture where men are seen as having to carry it all, to do it all alone, right? And so for you especially, being the main male figure in your household, right?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, like for your mum, you had to be tough. You had to be, you know, you had to hold it all together.
I had to, man, for sure.
So, I mean, it's no wonder that, you know, that's the way that things went, right?
Absolutely, man. I've seen Dad cry once throughout my whole life.
When was that?
That was Christmas 2016, 17. He bought his good wife at the time a car. And yeah, that's the only time I've seen him cry out of joy and, you know, happiness. But yeah, I've never seen him cry, and I still to this day I haven't, you know. And I think there'll be a time when I do see that. But he held himself very well. But that's a reflection of how my pop was to him growing up.
Yep.
My pop was a very hard man.
Yep.
And he wasn't the nicest of men either at times too. Even I experienced it as a grandson.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there was a lot of things what sort of come up throughout my schooling, and in grade 12 I had a really close friend, Zoe. She was 10 months clean off meth, and she was doing so well. And her and I, she was like a big little sister to me.
Yeah, gotcha.
It was just her and I were brother and sister essentially, and she had a relapse, and yeah, she was found dead from an overdose from meth, shooting it up, and that was another dagger in the heart. You know, she was doing so well. She had been battling that addiction for years.
Wow, man. How old was she?
17.
It's crazy, right? This is the stuff people don't hear about. It's like the fact that, like, I remember in the heyday of me doing that sort of stuff, like hearing about the people I'd been smoking gear with that had been on it since I was 13 years old. Mm-hmm. And that was wild to me because I came from a family that was actually quite well off, right? You know, like they, that we were never shown that sort of stuff. I went down that path at, you know, let's say 18 years old when it comes to the meth, but to hear that, like, you know, young men and women, 17 years old even, and smoking gear, it's just wild.
It is, man. And, you know, she was the most smart. She was so smart. You know, she could have achieved incredible things, but, you know, the pipe got her.
Yeah.
And that's been something what I've battled with. Not that I sort of went down the road of addiction with meth, but I've definitely, you know, had a pipe in my mouth. But there's been times where I've sort of caught myself knowing that I was going to end up in a similar situation, just with various of other drugs. But
just that stuff alone, bro, they say 5% will ever stop. 5% of people that smoke meth will ever completely stop.
That's wild, man.
5% of people, man. So that's like, if you try it for the first time, generally you're hooked. And I remember the conversation, I'm just talking to this because I can completely relate to how hard it is to come off that stuff, and especially for a young developing brain, bro. Like, I get that. I get that, man. The conversation I had with the guy that gave it to me for the first time was, are you sure you want this? Because your life will never be the same. And I didn't really quite understood what he meant. It was almost like a flick of consciousness for him to go, are you sure you want to try this? And yeah, he was completely right. Like, it was never the same. That was 8 years after that of just my life fucking almost going down the tubes. So, like, to your mate, bro, I fully understand where she was at with that.
For sure, man. And, you know, one thing what I'll sort of always hold is there was the night before she overdosed, I was receiving missed calls from her, and I was busy. I couldn't answer the phone. And there was text message. I still have the text messages on my phone.
Yeah, bro.
There's this text message of, Lockie, what are you up to? I want to see you. Like, let's go do something. Let's go for a drive. Just got to clear my head. And I was too busy to reply. And yeah, then the next day I got a message from one of our other friends saying Zoe's been found dead. And so that's wild, bro. That's like lived with me, and, you know, that was a hard pill to swallow as well. Like, potentially I could have changed that.
Yeah.
Potentially I could have sat with her and held space for her, and, you know, not allowed her to pick up that needle or pick up that pipe or however she did it. And yeah, that's been a journey that I've sort of navigated for many years, but the way I dealt with that was just a continuation of self-destruction. I think that's the reason why I led, 6-7 years of being an addict to everything.
Yep.
Was because subconsciously I didn't allow myself to grieve, and it's only now in the past year and a half that I've sort of been away from all that stuff, that I've been able to sit with myself and understand myself a little bit more.
It is actually a crazy thing, right? Because like you said, at the time it's like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do with these feelings? And it's like a void. But those feelings don't go anywhere.
No.
They don't go anywhere, man. You can be addicted to drugs for 15 years, 20 years, however long it is, but you're still dealing with the same problems that you were dealing with when you were 15 years old because you haven't dealt with them.
Yeah.
You're just taking yourself to a place of disassociation where it's like, I don't have to think about it, I don't have to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then that becomes the comfort zone, that becomes the thing that keeps you safe, and so you keep going back to the same thing to avoid that feeling that you've been trying to avoid for 15 years or 5 years or 8 years.
Because it's comfortable and fun.
Yeah, what's fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so that was, it's been years of navigating some of that stuff in terms of that. But, now that I've come out on the other side of, some of my darkest times, it's showed me tools and it's given me knowledge and I guess you could say some wisdom that I want to share into the world. And, I think I've noticed just how hard it is for a man to open up, because I've been there too.
For sure, bro.
Growing up, I was suppressed. I was never, in terms of being a male household, being the male of the household, I was sort of subconsciously, told that I couldn't express my emotions or whatnot. And then, there's a few things what I had to navigate as well. At 17, I was enlisted into the Navy. Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to, I guess, leave an impact, or I guess be someone in the world and leave a bit of a difference. So I thought, let's go join the military. Mm-hmm. And so I navigated that, and I got accepted into the Navy. I was waiting for the call to be like, you're leaving on this date. I had my approval. I was in, and then one night I was driving home drunk. I had a car full of the boys. I dropped them home, and I was going back to a party to pick up more people. I was coming down. I was in my brand new Ford Ranger, and I was coming down this long road, and then there was a sharp right hand turn. And I don't remember anything from the night except for this 30 seconds, but I was coming down, I was turning right, I was doing about 90 k's an hour in a 40 zone, and I come around this really tight pan bend, and the way I can describe it was like a slap, like a divine slap on the arse end of the car, and the rear wheels sort of kicked out, and I went down an embankment. The wheels grabbed into the ground, and I'd flipped the car. I'd flipped my Ranger, landed on the roof. The roof was caved my head into the back of the headrest, and I didn't know what happened. I'm like, what's fucking just happened? I got shuffled to hospital, neck brace and all, and blew 3 times legal limit. It was like 0.148 or something.
Hectic.
I was maggot. Dude, I was
proper.
Dude, I was maggot, man.
Yeah.
And I went to court and everything, and I got terminated from the Navy. And that again was just another dagger in the heart. It's like I thought that was my purpose and that was my why. Like every day I woke up, I sort of cleaned myself up. I got a little bit fit so I can enter. And I kissed it out the fucking door. I ruined that whole chance because I was behind the wheel drunk, and that led down another road of self-sabotage, self-destruction. Picked up the bottle right again. Yeah. And the next weekend I was on the piss again.
Just quickly talking into that, right? This thing took place where you flipped your car. At the time, who were you blaming for that?
Oh, I blamed myself.
You did?
Yeah. I took ownership, but I didn't realise the magnitude of it.
Yeah.
The next day when I got out of hospital, my dad drove down from Sunshine Coast, Mum come in from wherever she was, and we had a family meeting, and they were like, do you realise how that could have ended up? And I was sitting there laughing. I was like, yeah. just naive, man.
Yeah, bro.
Just like a fucking a boy.
Just taking that life for granted, hey?
Yeah, man, 100%. You know, Dad didn't sleep for 2 months after that.
Wow.
He couldn't sleep. Mum couldn't sleep. My sisters couldn't sleep because they knew the depth of what I did.
See, like, hearing that as a parent, like, you know, having children of my own, it, like, once upon a time, I would have been like, oh, yeah, fuck yeah, flip the car. But now that I've got my own kids, like, because I've been in similar situations where I've flipped cars or, like, you know, been in some real risky things, you know, some real risky things that have taken place. Now having a kid, it's just like, could have been over like that. Could have been over like that, right? So I fully understand where they're coming from with that, man. Like, it's just a fucking scary thing.
It is, man. And I remember the window was that crushed. It was probably like, it went from like what a window is like that gap, went to that. The car was mangled, man.
Yeah.
And I crawled out of it, and there was a cop within 30 seconds. I don't know how, he must have been right behind me. But he goes, how the fuck are you still alive?
Wow.
Like even the ambulance rocked up and they said, we don't see people walk away from this type of stuff. They're either paraplegic or they're dead. Like, you have no idea how lucky you are. And I'm sitting there taking videos of myself, you know, Snapchat, sending to the boys.
Probably morphined up to the fucking eyeballs, though.
Hey?
On the morphine up to the eyeballs, though.
Oh, I didn't get anything.
Really?
Dude, I was maggot. Like, couldn't even see straight.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, that led down to another path of self-destruction and self-sabotage. And, you know, that gave me more tools. And then I sort of navigated from that. I'm like, all right, what else can I fucking do? So then laid down the line at 20 or 19 and a half, I said, fuck it, let's move to Canada, you know? I had this calling of Canada. The way that I'd wake up and I just start thinking about Canada. It was on my mind 24/7. I was like, fuck it, let's go. So I got in contact with an agency and I got my stuff ready and I essentially got accepted to go live in Canada. So I packed my bags at 20 years of age and I packed my life into 2 bags, which is fucking cool, man. I was fucking stoked. I had a one-way ticket. I'm like, this is going to be this is the next opportunity, you know, the next chapter.
For sure, man. Complete sea change. You can be anyone you want to be.
Yeah, man, 100%. I went from, you know, wanting to be in the military to this or that and thinking that was my why, but I went through that circumstance with losing my enlistment through that car crash and that led me to, you know, discovering a new purpose, a new why, and that was going overseas. And I landed in Vancouver. I think it was like April 12th, 2022 or something. And I was stoked, man. I was stoked. You know, I'd been sober for a little while, about 8 months. Before that, that's when I got really into my fitness and running. So I lived my life pretty healthily and clean for about 8 to 10 months. But then I got to Canada and first thing I was in the bar, smashing back beers, you know, excited and stuff. And yeah, then I moved out to a little a ski town called Banff.
Yeah.
Most beautiful place on earth. You know, some of the scenery is just like something you'd see in a movie and it's just, I can't describe just how beautiful the place is. And with that culture of, you know, travellers and a lot of other Australians who, you know, like the session a little bit too much, the coke there just took my head off.
Yeah,
just robbed me of my soul.
And it's so cheap over there too.
Dude, man, I was paying $80 for a bag and sometimes even less.
Yeah.
And, you know, the quality is just something it's hard to sort of describe just how good it is. And I just started smashing packets, man. Like, I had my first line of coke at 17 and then I sort of, you know, I had a little bit of an addiction, you could say. I, you know, budget into my paycheck if I can afford a bag for that weekend.
Wild, hey?
Since I was like 17 until, you know, 19 when I sort of got myself a little bit clean and sober. But then, you know, $80 bags, I had a tiny bit of savings. I let rip. And that led down to many facets of the people who I was hanging around with, the people I was getting involved with. You know, we're about 2.5 hours away from the main city, and the main city is a pretty big hub for all that sort of stuff, the underground world. And, you know, people are doing runs here and there, and, there's some pretty high level people coming into the town to drop off stuff. And, when you get involved with that sort of crowd, then you get involved with that sort of stuff too.
Of course.
With the dealing and, the seeing, the quantity, and just some of the amount of stuff I've seen, like in one little bucket, just different stuff you fucking can't even say the name of, know. That it was getting real, but I was so excited. I was like, I just love the session, man. I just love the coke, and I was on it, every single day. I was smashing 2 grams a day, and I was, going out for benders 4 days, 3 days, wouldn't sleep in bloody a second, just going to work with a bag, with an 8-ball, or just being a functioning addict.
Yep.
And I thought it was normal because everyone else around me was doing it too. And don't get me wrong, I was having a lot of fun. So I didn't really notice the destructiveness of what it was.
It's hard to see it when you're in it, though. It really is so hard to see it.
It is, man. I remember I'd FaceTime my friends that it'd be like, 7 a.m. their time, but it's, 9 o'clock my time, and I'm just off my trolley. And that was every single day. And it got to a point where people were like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, Lockie, you've come over there to have a life and to experience life, but here you are. How many days have you been awake for? Like, you're 3 days old and you're still doing this shit. Like, and that was just a growing situation. And I found myself, I was like, I actually need to do something about this. So I spent 4 months there, and then I moved up north to the Yukon to do some carpentry. And that was like my rehab. That was like my sober house, which was awesome. I was earning great money. I was, back doing construction, which I'd, for the most part, actually pretty enjoy. And, I sort of got myself a little bit clean and healthy, and, but then 2 months would go around, it's time to go back down for a swing. I got myself an apartment in Calgary, the main city of where all that sort of stuff is, and I still had connections. And what do you do when you've been sober for 8 weeks and you got to
celebrate, right?
You celebrate, and you've got a healthy bank account too, because you can't spend anything out there. Went down, texted one of my buddies, and I'm like, sweet, I'm going to come around, catch up. And I'd been to this house once before to pick up a drop, and I rocked up in this Uber. I'm like, oh, this house looks familiar. And I walked in, the most trappist of trap houses you can ever think of. There's graffitis on the wall. There's, snapped in half mattresses here and there everywhere. There's holes in the wall. There's about 30 people like squatting. There's more crack pipes than you can see anything,
Just a proper trap house.
Dude, a trap house through and through. And this guy pulls out this huge bag of coke, would have been more than a kilo. It's just a pillow. And he just sort of scoops up, and how much do you want, mate? I was like, oh, well, I don't know, Q. So, and he just, just shoveled it off. And that was the start of, I guess, another thing. I was hanging around those types of people, and I was getting their contacts, and I was in a regular contact with them. The house, it was the main guy. He was the kingpin of the whole city, and like he was the actual kingpin. It became. I did a few more swings here and there, back and forth, and still kept in regular contact. They'd come over to my apartment, and we just sort of just party and bender, and sort of getting deeper into that lifestyle. And then that was getting to a point where they're offering like, large sums of cash to go and do runs from, Calgary up to Banff, and then just like being a mule. Yeah. And I sort of had a little bit of self-awareness that probably wouldn't have been the best of ideas. So I kindly said no, but, I found myself in their trap house 2 days before Christmas, I think 2023, I think it was 2022. And the guy was on house arrest, but he wasn't there. And it's, minus 35 outside, there's people coming inside and out. And then we get a knock on the door. And everyone just sort of...
Yeah, they know the knock.
It was the knock.
Yeah.
And we sort of peek out the window, and there's about, 3 or 4 large, those SWAT cars with like, there was even the SWAT car what has the long pole at the front to bust
the front door down.
The front door in the garage.
The shit you see on movies.
Dude, literally, man, it's North America, like this stuff actually happens.
It's hectic, right? Yeah.
And there was a whole line of trucks out on the street, and this thing was in the driveway. And then we see shadows walking around the house, just multiple shadows. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm off my head. Like,
Yeah. How many days old are you at this point?
oh, I'd say a day and a half, two.
Yeah,
2
so the
days.
shadow people are normal anyway at this point in time.
Yeah. But this was actual people. And
So hectic, bro.
And man, I fucking dacked it. I shit myself.
Of course.
They've all got, guns across their chest, and they're all guns drawn. And the guy wasn't there. So they were just doing a check, but he wasn't there. So one of the guys sort of talked him out of it. I don't know how he did. They must have had a warrant to come inside, but I fucking busted out the back door like a little scared little boy, man. And it was minus 35, and they all, had their torches drawn, and they were like, show me your ID, show me your ID. So I got out my ID. I'm shaking, stuttering.
I can only imagine.
And I've got so much coke in my pants, man, so much. And then I managed to escape my way out of it, but then I got home, and I just to deal with what I just sort of went through, I just started smashing it.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
And then I kept doing that about another 12 hours, and then I found myself convulsing on the floor of my apartment.
Yeah, man.
Just I had that much, I was trying to sort of process what has happened, and knowing that I could have ended up in a really bad place, and I found myself overdosing on my apartment floor. I was scared, I could feel my body started to shut down, uncontrollably shaking, and I started to flicker, there was lights on in the apartment, but everything was dark. My eyes were open. I could just feel myself just starting to shut down, and that got to a point where I was like, this could be it. This could actually be it. And I had my housemate there, but he was sort of in the same situation, and he was just trying to calm me down. I'm like, no, I'm done here. This is it. Is this how I'm going to go out? And so I sort of brought myself to, and thankfully something above me was sort of holding space or whatever, but I come through it. And
when you say you come through it, were you physically fighting to keep yourself alive at that point in time?
Yeah.
Because you can feel yourself dropping in, right? And dropping out and dropping in and dropping out, but you were fucking not letting yourself go.
I was internally, I was on the nod. I was,
yeah.
and I just had to physically, it was this force. It was a battle. And that was probably one of the most scariest times that I've ever been through. And I've only had one other situation like that, was when I was at home. I dropped 8 points of MD in the space of 2 hours. And I was convulsing on someone's fucking stairwell.
Yeah.
And that was the only time I've ever experienced that. I was 17 at that point too. And that was a big wake up call. And so I sort of navigated my way to talk to a few people after that situation occurred. When I come through it, a few hours went by, and I sort of got myself, and I woke up 16 hours later. I'm like, okay, I'm not dead. Sweet. Let's go talk to someone about
Still
this.
here, we're good.
Yeah, and so I reached out to a few people, told them what happened, and they helped me through it. By this point, it was time for me to go back up to work up north, and that was a breath of fresh air. And then the holidays went by, and then I went back down to Banff, and I found myself in the same situation with the same group of people. I was at a kick-on, and someone pulled out a gun, sort of put it on the table, and I was like, oof, is that really sitting in front of me right now? And there's it's the same group of people, and they're like, we want you to join our crew. And I was like, sorry, I can't do that. And they're like, no, I'll give you a few days. And they sort of mapped out what they wanted me to do, and they said, you'll have one of these on you at all times. It was a Glock. I'm like, fuck, nah, I can't do that. I just sort of bailed on them. From then I haven't spoken to them since that day, which is for the best. But yeah, there's been a few other times where, I've gotten on it, and the bag's been laced with fentanyl, and I'm back in that same situation of me thinking I'm dying. I've ended up overdosing 4 times.
Wow, bro.
From that stuff. And
Didn't know it was 4 times, man. That's heavy.
4 times I found myself convulsing on the floor.
And that's the thing, right, with coke and everything these days, you literally have no idea what's in it.
No, man, no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. I had this one packet, and it was just different from the get-go. And I started to get a little bit paranoid, and the guy I was with, he was like, oh, it's fentanyl. I'm like, what? And that sort of set me into a whole different,
Yeah, even just hearing that would have been like, okay.
It was, man.
Yep.
And I didn't touch anything else after that for a very long time, just because I was just so scared, and like the way I felt on that bed with that stuff in me, it's something I never want to experience again. I never want anyone to ever experience that feeling. It was the most horrible thing on the fucking planet. And yeah, that was probably the darkest of my days. And you know, apart from having all those come downs, I was always suicidal. I'm like, I just don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, bro.
You know, and it's like the
and how easy would it have been to just actually go, you know what, I'm done?
So easy, man.
Like if you didn't have the mental willpower or other things going for you in your life, like to actually just go, you know what, this is me. You know, like I get that, like literally when you're coming down, especially after being on a bender for that long, it's like you don't even know who the fuck you are.
You don't, man. I remember vividly, I'd, you know, stand up and look directly in the mirror and just my hand on the base and just looking in the mirror like, who are you?
Yeah.
Like talking to the mirror, who are you?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And, you know, it's like the contrast and the polarity that I was in. I moved my life to the other side of the world to experience the most beautiful experience anyone can. But I found myself in the darkest of holes. And that didn't really sit right with me either. So I got myself out of that, and I've been sort of stayed away from the rest of that sort of lifestyle of my time in Canada. So I spent 12 months in the Yukon, which is probably the best 12 months of my life. I was mostly sober for it, mostly clean for it. I was living life. I was riding dirt bikes. I was riding snowmobiles in the winter. I was snowboarding every day.
Yeah, just doing cool shit.
I was doing cool shit.
What you went over there to do in the first place.
What I went over to do in the first place, you know. And then I decided, you know, it's time to, you know, go and really enjoy the last 6 months of my visa. And so I decided I'll move to Whistler. I knew Whistler was a little bit like Banff, but I was like, no, I'm strong enough. I can, you know, hold off from that stuff. I found myself in the same situations as I did in Banff.
How long did it take you before you slipped back into that?
A couple of days, probably about 4 or 5 days, and then
once you arrived.
Once I arrived, yeah, I stayed strong for a bit, and then there was 2.5 weeks of destruction. I said, nah, I'm done. So I booked a one-way ticket and come home.
Can I just ask quickly, okay, so something that took place there and also when you went to Banff was like you found yourself in that pattern after being clean and sober and like being in a good place. What was it for you that led you to then self-destruct in both of those situations? What was it you were trying to achieve?
Fitting in.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I get that, man.
Fitting in. It was like, especially in places like that, if you don't drink, you're weird.
Well, not only that, right? It's like the universal language. He drinks, he takes bag, he's good, he's one of the boys. You fit in with fucking everybody, man. And I get that, man. That was one of the biggest things that myself and a lot of the boys that I work with struggle to overcome. It's because of, well, if you don't do that, you're a fucking pussy. If you don't do that, you're a fucking weirdo. In today's day and age, like, to be someone that doesn't drink or someone that doesn't take bags, like, you're the weird person.
100%. And that's how I felt. If I didn't get on it, I felt weird. If I wasn't at a kick-ons at 5, 6 a.m, I was weird.
Yeah, bro.
Like, where were you last night, Lockie? Man, we all sort of wanted you there. Like, I wasn't feeling it. Come on, bro. You're in Canada.
Don't be a bitch.
Don't be a bitch.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just got sick of my own shit, man. And yeah, I booked my ticket off the back end of a bender. I was 2 days old, and I'm like, nah, boom.
Probably the best decision you ever made after a bender, though.
100%,
yeah.
For sure. The best decision I made on a bender. There's not a lot of good decisions what get made on them bad boys.
No, you're not wrong.
So, and yeah, that was, I guess, in a nutshell, that's the depth of sort of what I went through with in terms of, drugs and alcohol. And then when I come home, what do you do when you haven't seen your mates for the last 2 years? Dude, same shit. And so I navigated that for a little while, up until a point for about 1.5 years ago. I was driving home from Bender, just catching up with all my mates after all that time, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was driving, and I was, going through a bit of a rainforesty part back at like Mount Tambourine area and stuff, and I was like, yeah, no, this isn't for me anymore. And I tried to pull myself into a set of trees. My hand was twitching to pull, but something just didn't allow me to, or something was holding on to. It was a weird feeling. But yeah, that day, 1.5 years ago, I was ready to take my life again, for probably the 3rd or 4th time I've sort of attempted. And that's when I knew, I could really go do something about this. So,
Yeah, bro.
So from then I've been on a huge journey. So yeah, with a lot of the work with like psychologists and different sort of life coaches, I've, been shown things, and my mental health advocacy comes from lived experience. And
Beautiful, bro.
the way I want to show up in the community is I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. There was a lot of times there where my days almost stopped counting.
For sure, man.
My presence on this earth almost sort of vanished.
Man, that hurts my heart to actually hear that, bro. Like, I knew that you'd struggled with mental health, but not to this degree. And, like, being a good friend of yours actually makes me feel like shit that I haven't actually asked your story previous to this, man. But fuck, I love you, dude. And honestly, like, the thought of not having you here really breaks my heart, man. So thank you for having the strength to continue on.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man. It's nice to... Yeah, this is the most I've ever spoken about my story. So... I guess here it is. But yeah, man, it comes from a place of I really want to see a change in the world and see a change in the way that we view addiction.
Most definitely, brother.
I know I'm speaking from my experience, and I know you could probably relate, but
100%.
Because we have this shadow of past addict on ourselves, we're labelled something, out of the norm in society. There's been a few times where I've shared a little bit of my story and I've just got judged straight off the bat.
And you almost feel that people look at you differently straight away, right? And it's almost taken, like, I remember doing a podcast and I was explaining my story, like, as I do, like, I'm just raw. Mm-hmm. And he's like, whoa, in no way are we condoning drug use here, by the way. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's obviously not where I'm going with this. But it's like, this is actually a real topic that takes place in the world, man.
It does, man. And a lot of people who don't experience that life or have any connections, they have no idea the depth of what it can get to.
Of course.
And that's why I think a lot of people with past experiences can relate to each other so well, is because we know just how hard it can be when we try and open up and when we are looked as a different person other than a human, because we've had past experiences. I don't think, our setbacks and stumbles are all part of the climb. And
yeah, man. It's not a linear journey. Growth in life, just any of it, it's not linear. Like, we're not going to one day just wake up and everything's perfect and it's going to continue to be that way. It's peaks and pits. It
is, man. Exactly right. And I think, I truly want to just shed a different perspective on the world and in the society. I think in a world full of negativity, we have the opportunity on a daily basis to really show up and instill some positivity in such a dark world.
And that's the thing, right? Like, if we focus on the darkness, we only see darkness. But even just by you shedding your light on the world, bro, like, you're impacting so many lives, and people think that, I can't make a difference, so what's the fucking point? It's a very pessimistic way to look at things.
Yeah,
but
man.
your videos that you put out, bro, the ripple effect that's going to have on the lives of so many people on a daily basis, because of the beautiful platform which we have, which is social media, which gets a bad rap so often because there is so much darkness on there.
Yeah.
But it comes down to where you put your focus, right?
It is,
It comes down where you put your focus. And, bro, like, this is the thing, like, one person can't make a difference. Like, you don't know the impact that you're having. It's unfathomable, the amount of lives that you're touching. And not just the people that are watching your videos, but then the people around them, because of the ripple effect that are, having their father show up in a different way, or having their partner show up in a healthier way, or having their kid watch one of your videos and then, going, you know what, it's worth me being here. Like, that ripple effect, that positive effect that you have on the world is unfathomable, bro.
Yeah, bro, and I thank you so much for that. It's... To me, it's like, I'm just a guy putting out some videos, hoping to touch some lives. But, some of the messages that I receive, there's this one message what stands out, and it was a very long message, and I read through it, and basically the general gist of the message was, this person, she'd been struggling for quite a little bit amount of time, and she had come across one of my videos one night while she was hanging up the rope. She was almost going to take her life, and she stopped for a second and just opened her phone, and my video was the first one to come up. And she watched that video and she sat back and just started crying, and she's still here today, when that's something what really brings so much hope. And I think, we've kept in contact a little bit, just checking in on her and making sure that, she's doing well. But since that night she saw one of my videos, she's got help. She's seen people, and she's formed new connections, new relationships, new friendships, and she's doing a lot better.
That's beautiful, bro.
That was just the back end of one of my videos. 30 seconds I recorded and I put it out there, and you know, and it fills my heart with so much warmth and fulfillment, knowing that something that I put out there can actually really change a life. And that's my whole life journey. That's my whole life. That's my purpose, man. It's my biggest why. If I can help one person's life be a little bit less heavy, then my job's done. But I don't want to stop at one person.
Of course not. Once you get the taste of that, brother, it's just such a beautiful thing. And it's funny because you were saying earlier, I actually really wanted to come back to this because it's so relevant to everyone. And everyone that I have a conversation with that has a beautiful story. Like, obviously, you felt your purpose was being in the Navy. You know, that's what you felt your purpose, your calling was to make a difference. And you got, you know, obviously unenrolled, or would have been a dishonourable discharge, right?
Yeah, it's termination of enlistment.
Yeah, so termination of enlistment. And that would have felt like the end of the world, like I've lost my purpose.
It did.
And then you went through this tragic just chain of events that brought you to where you are today, you know. And it's funny because all the struggle that we go through generally will become part of what our purpose is. You know, through our hardest challenges, our purpose is born. Because what you endured, what you went through, bro, the things that you grew through, not particularly went through, but the things you grew through to become the man you are today, now give you the tools that so many others would never have to be able to say, hey, I went first. I've been there. I've overcome that. And as human beings, we want evidence. You can sit there in your psychologist chair and tell me that you need to do this thing, but it's like you're talking from a fucking textbook. I'm not going to take your advice. I'm sorry, but especially for us as men, there's big ego around that. But seeing Lockie Welch has sat there, he's done that, he's been through the things, and you're talking from a place of authenticity and authority because you've been there. There's so much power in that, man. There's so much power, and we can turn our hardest pain into our biggest purpose. You know, and that is, I feel, the journey of life.
It is, man. You know, sometimes our hardest battle will be the greatest story we tell. You know, and it's all within us, and it's all within our purpose to, you know, live a life. Setbacks and stumbles are all part of the climb. And if I didn't ride that car that night, I wouldn't be who I am today. If I couldn't imagine my life if I actually went into the military. I could not for 1 second think how I would be, you know. And it just goes to show that everything that happens to us is happening for us and not to us. It's all leading us to the person who we're meant to be.
Yeah, bro.
And there's this preconceived notion throughout society that you have to be someone for someone else, or, you know, have to show up in a different way. You have to wear different masks to be in different friend groups. It's like, no, that's not authenticity. Authenticity is showing up who you are without having any, you know, fear of judgment, you know, and being, you know, uncomfortable, being comfortable, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. You know, it's the way that life has played out for me and for so many others has been at times the most horrible and most tragic experience, and like I feel like my days weren't worth living, but
yeah, bro,
they've landed me into a place now where I genuinely am so fulfilled, and I'm so joyful just to even wake up, because there was days where I almost didn't. And I think once you have that contrast in your journey, and when you sort of allow yourself to notice the growth and the struggle that you've been through, that's when you can really start to hold so much more, your deepest, you know, profound sense of gratitude for everything. Like, man, the fact that I'm sitting in this chair right now talking to you fills my heart.
Amen,
you know,
brother.
You know, and even just to show up and to be in this space with people like you, it fills my heart. And, you know, I'm so far from where I want to be, but man, I'm so far from where I used to be, and fuck, that's powerful.
Bro, you gave me that reminder last week on Friday, I think it was. I was just saying, bro, I've been struggling just with things in business, things going on. You're like, man, thinking about the person you were 7 years ago, he'd be fucking so proud of the person you are today. And that's the thing, we have to have that reminder, right? Because we're always so focused on where we're going, not where we are.
Yeah.
And not thinking about where we've come from.
Yeah.
And I think that's the lesson that I've been having as of late, and even with my beautiful partner Tiani, is like being more present in where you're at, and not focused on what you don't have, but focusing on the things you do have compared to who you were.
100%.
That having that awareness and having that perspective is just so beautiful. It's such a powerful place to be, because it's like, yeah, I'm not who I used to be. I'm not who I want to be, but I'm exactly who I am today, which is helping me get there.
I think also in a world what's built off
comparison.
In a world what's built off comparison, we find ourselves comparing ourselves to other people. But it's like, compare yourself to who you were 7 years ago. Compare yourself to who you were 3 years ago. Compare yourself to who you were 3 months ago. And that's true growth. No one, you're the main character in your own story. Fuck everyone else. Like, no one else actually matters. And I think that's one thing that what I've had to digest it's like I don't have to keep living my life for other people. I don't have to keep being the life of the party. I don't have to keep being the man who can snort the most amount of rack, who can do the biggest, the biggest snorkel of a beer, who can, smash 2 grams in a fucking hour just cause, like I don't have to be that man anymore because I don't want to be that man for myself.
Well, I've got a question for you around that. I think that's actually a perfect segue into something I wanted to talk to you about, and that's obviously doing those things as you were, being the guy that snort the most rack, snort the most bag, drink the most piss, whatever it might have been. That was all about validation. Look at me, I'm the man. How has that affected you now with such a, I guess, rapid growth that you've had on social media? You went from almost, 0 followers to 50,000 followers in a matter of months. Like you had a couple of thousand prior.
Yeah.
How has that affected you and, I guess, your mental health? Having such rapid growth, seeing that there was such a rapid response when it comes to the likes, the follows, all that sort of stuff, when it either slows down or drops out. And have you found yourself almost seeking validation through that?
A little bit. I think more so what comes up to me when you ask that is I feel like I have to show up like that I have it all figured out. Like I have to.
There's pressure.
I feel so much pressure to show up and be the happy guy. To show up and, because people come to my page every day to look for new videos, but the days I don't record are the days that I'm channeling, stuff for myself. And there was a period of time throughout my deepest amount of growth, I was posting twice a day, 7 days a week. And that's when I was seeing, 1,200 followers a day. It was just boom, boom. DMs were just flying off the rails. The comments, the likes, everything was just boom. That's when I was forcing myself to get out there. I was forcing myself to do that. And I think a little bit, I'd post a story or whatnot to receive validation because I wasn't needing it myself.
Yeah.
Whether if I was posting, a little bit about my perspective or like a slightly different way of narrating some form of paragraph so that I could receive validation from the DMs. Or if I didn't receive, minimum 1,000 likes in a reel, I'd be shitty.
Yeah.
Or, if I didn't see a minimum amount of 800 followers a day, I'd be like, oh. So it was in the time of the rapid growth, a part of me definitely did attach myself to those numbers. And I'm not sure I think I spoke to you about this, but I've definitely spoken to someone else about it, but I definitely found myself, I guess holding my self-worth. It's almost like holding my identity to the amount of followers.
Attached to your social media identity, right?
Yeah. And there was a period of time there, probably like 2 months ago, where I was so focused on the numbers and, it started becoming a little bit less about impact and more about the most amount of likes. I cut that off fucking real quick because that's just not who I am.
That's great awareness, bro. It's really beautiful awareness because obviously a lot of people get stuck in that, right?
They do. And I noticed it come up. There was about a week or two where I was like solid on like checking my phone. Oh, how many followers have we got this morning? Oh, I've been offline for 30 minutes. I've only got 100 new followers. Oh, rah, rah. And it's like, I attached myself to that. There's about a week or two of that. And I said, fuck that. So I cut the rope to that anchor. And, now it's come back to a place of, it's okay. I'm putting in the content for not only myself, but for other people who are struggling.
Yeah.
It's come back to the real depth of the impact. I couldn't give a fuck about the followers, man. I couldn't give a fuck about the likes or the comments. Because I know just that one video can save someone's life, just like it did to that girl on TikTok.
Yeah, bro.
And that's what it's come down to. I think that's the depth of my core of my content, and that's the depth of who I am. I don't see myself being attached to a number or a follower or whatnot. It's attached to the level of impact that I can have, and that's what I strive to show up to and do every single day.
Bro, beautiful impact, right? I think that's probably what we can relate. It's like the things that we want to do in the world. It's not about ourselves, it's about something bigger than that. And I think when men, women can realize that that's purpose, right? When they can find that purpose, you live a fulfilled life. But it's so easy to get caught up in like you said, the numbers of it. For me, it was about the money. It stopped becoming about serving men, and it started to become about how much money I could make. Yeah. Became really fucking toxic and came from a place of greed, which also then led to my demise within business. And so I guess hearing that from you was also a really good reminder for me. So thank you for sharing that, bro.
Thank you, bro.
Now, bro, if people want to find you, where can they find you? Where's the best place to reach out? If they want to find out more about your story, if they want to just have a yarn, they want to get to know the Red Dog.
The Red Dog, yeah. So, the Instagram, Lockie.Welch, TikTok. I'm not really engaged with TikTok at the moment just because that's not my main platform, but Instagram is definitely the best way where people can find me. I reply to almost every single one of my messages. So, if anyone is struggling, feel free to reach out. We all just need someone to hold space sometimes, and we all need someone to be able to listen. And I have a lot of capacity.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think if anyone is listening and they're going through a tough time, know that days do get better. You're currently in the fundamental process of who you're meant to become.
Beautiful, bro.
So sit with that.
Before we close off, I've got a little question for you. So obviously the name of the podcast is Two Truths and a Life. What does it mean to live your truth?
Authenticity and impact.
And how has living through authenticity and impact affected your life?
It's allowed me to be comfortable with who I am to the depth of my core.
Beautiful, bro. Beautiful. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, brother.
I've got so much love for you, bro. Thank you
Likewise.
for sharing your story and allowing us to hold a space where you could do that.